right, I want to welcome everyone to another episode of the Shadows Podcast. I'm your host, Trip Odenheimer, and I'm really excited today to have with me Michael Unbroken. He is a coach, mentor, educator for adult survivors of child abuse, helps trauma survivors, got a podcast, book. Does some amazing, amazing things. Sir, welcome to the Shadows.
Trip, what's up, my friend? The name of your show makes me think of Bane, where he's like, I was born in the darkness.
Yeah, see, huge Batman fan, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
All
totally.
right, so let our listeners know where you located.
I'm in Denver, but really, dude, it's whatever hotel room I happen to be in. We travel so much. So
Okay, you got a sweet little setup behind you there with the Think Unbroken, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But I'm gonna put you through some Fearful 5 questions here. First one for you, book recommendation for our listeners.
look, dude, there's a bazillion books I've read. I've read over 500. The one that often just feels like, man, if people read this, they would really understand something beautiful about life. It's actually one of two books I ever recommend to my clients. It's Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. I think it's a really powerful book, especially with getting to that place of like trying to understand how to be okay with who you are.
Okay. Favorite holiday movie?
Well, it depends on the holiday. So, of course, the best Christmas movie is Die Hard. Everyone knows that.
Thank you.
And then my favorite, since all of your horror stuff is behind you and we just passed Halloween, the original John Carpenter Halloween is my favorite. It actually might be my favorite movie of all time.
Okay, so yeah, I got the poster with the two guys that played Mike Myers that signed it. So pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's rad.
Okay, and thank you for bonus points for Die Hard being a Christmas movie.
Well, everyone else who doesn't agree with that is just wrong. So let's just call it what it is, bro.
Thank you. Thank you. And I can tell the demographic dip off at this point in the show for the ones who don't.
Every year show, everyone just stop listening.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Right. You could have any job for a day just to try it out. What would it be?
Well, it'd be my job for sure. Or, dude, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'd probably want to be like Jay-Z for a day.
Okay. Live that schedule.
Just see what that's like to be on stage in front of 50,000 people.
Yeah. Okay. And it's dope. Like a regular. What is an interesting fact about you that not a lot of people know?
I mean, everything, dude. Nobody knows anything about me. I'm a human being who has 60,000 thoughts a day. I mean, like anyone, you can't. I was even having this conversation with someone recently. I was like, we could know each other for 50 years and you would still only know like 5% of who I am.
That's true.
Right? So everything.
Okay. And last question. Dinner for 3 with 3 historical figures who are no longer with us.
Probably Winston Churchill, Freddie Mercury, and Genghis Khan.
It's an interesting group. Okay, we'll go with that. Well, you survived the Fearful 5 icebreaker questions here, and now let's jump into your story. So you had an interesting, to say the least, upbringing. So talk to us a little bit about where you grew up and what your family dynamics were like.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in the Midwest in Indianapolis. I'm a latchkey kid for sure. I spent the vast majority of my childhood in this hyper-volatile household. My mother was a drug addict and alcoholic, bipolar, manic depressive, and suicidal. And in fact, when I was only 4 years old, she cut off my right index finger. My stepfather was massively abusive. Like, dude, I'm 6'4", 220. I'm a linebacker size guy. Mm-hmm. So imagine a dude my size beating up a 7-year-old. And so he put me in the hospital all the time, would beat the shit out of my brothers and I. And I spent the majority of our childhood homeless and deeply in poverty. In fact, man, we lived with over 30 different families between the time I was 8 to 12, getting bounced around place to place to place, strangers, friends, families, vans, abandoned houses. Like, it was gnarly, man. Jeez. And when I was 12, my grandma adopted me, which is a godsend in some sense. But I'm biracial, black and white, and she's an old racist ass white lady from a town in Tennessee you never heard of, right? So insert identity crisis. And at 12 years old, I started getting high. at 13 drunk, and by 15 I was expelled from school for selling drugs. And man, I'm breaking in houses, stealing cars, running from the cops, getting shot at, we're hurting people. Like, it's some movie shit, man. It's crazy, the stuff that we're doing. And eventually I don't graduate high school. They basically hand me the diploma and they're like, dude, get out, we're done with you. Because this is a different world 20 years ago. They would just do that. And I'm working a warehouse job, trying to figure out life at 18. I get fired and I'm sitting in my car and I'm like, okay, hold on, man. What is the solution for this poverty, this homelessness, this abuse, the chaos of my life? I was like, oh, it's money, right? Because Trip, like, that's the thing, man. People always are like, man, money will solve all your problems. And that's what I thought too. And so I made a declaration. I want to make $100,000 a year legally by the time that I'm 21. And the legal part was important because I got family in prison for life. I've been in handcuffs more times than I can count. And my 3 childhood best friends have been murdered. And so, dude, I knew, like, if I didn't change some shit, like, I knew where I was going. Yeah. And so I just started learning skills and I started interviewing. And for 2 years, everyone just told me no. I got told no hundreds of times. And as I was heading into 21, I landed a job with a Fortune 10 company, dude. Fortune 10. No high school diploma, no college education. And as I head into 21, I made $96,800. So I almost hit my goal. Yeah. So freaking close. And then I discovered the truth. Money only brings out who you are in your unhealed state. And so next thing you know, fast forward 5 years, I'm 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep. I'm high from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. My girlfriend finds out I'm cheating on her with like fucking 10 people. My little brother tells me, never talk to me again. You're not my brother. And here I am making 150, 200 grand a year, and I'm $50,000 in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, like complete rock bottom.
Yeah.
And I have this moment where I'm laying in bed. It's 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. I'm, again, 350 pounds. I'm smoking a joint, eating chocolate cake, and watching the CrossFit games, dude. Like, rock bottom. And I pulled myself up. I went in the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. And, man, I remember being 8 years old. And the water company had come and turned our water off. And look, they were always turning off our water, our heat, our electricity. I mean, it was just another Tuesday. But for whatever reason, this day I go in the backyard, I grab this little blue bucket, I walk across the street to our neighbor's house, and for the first time I stole water. And I remember being like, man, when I'm a grown-up, this is not going to be my life. And Trip, dude, in so many ways it wasn't, right? But I was still that hurt, lost little boy. And as I looked in the mirror, I asked myself a question. I said, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And the answer was no excuses, just results. Yeah. And that meant I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to allow everyone else to tell me who I could be. I was going to start doing the things I needed to do to change my life. And almost 13 years later, dude, here I am talking to you.
Yeah, and I appreciate you opening up and sharing that story. And we'll definitely unpack a lot of that. And I like what you said there at the end about you kind of change from that. You hear a lot that victor, are you a victor or a victim mindset? And some people carry that victim mindset through most of their life.
Yeah.
And going back to your story to kind of lead up to where you got into today, what exactly happened that day? Do you even remember when you were 4 years old when your mother cut off your finger?
No, I don't.
Wow. That is
but man, I look down at it. It's just colored, multiple skin grafts, multiple surgeries, can't feel half of it. And, for a long time, I would look down at that and I would be like, man, fuck the world, fuck everybody. I hate everything. And, and then I was like, wait a second, man, like, you don't get to control the past.
Yeah.
Right. And I could look at this as a hindrance. And like, I carried a lot of shame with it and a lot of embarrassment with it because, like, obviously. And what happened was I was like, no, man, I'm not going to let this be the marker for who I become. And, those moments, the thing about my mother that was one of the things I understood deeply as I became educated in trauma, right? Because now I have over 30 trauma-informed certifications. I've worked with people like Bessel van der Kolk, Pete Walker, Anna Lamke. I mean, God, the list goes on. Dr. Caroline Leaf, Mariel Bouquet, like the list goes. I've talked to everybody in this space. Oh, Gabor Mate, of course. How could I forget him? And like, as you get educated and as you learn, what I understood about my mother was she was suffering massively, right? She didn't know how to love herself or take care of herself. In fact, it was so bad when I was 14, I put a restraining order on her. Like, imagine that, 14 years old, putting a restraining order on your own mother. And when I was 18, she attacked me. And Trip, my mom must have hit me 10,000 times as a kid. But I'm 18, I'm fucking 6'4", 220. I'm playing sports at this point. I'm like, I'm done with this. And I throw her to the ground and I go, if you ever touch me again, I'll kill you. And dude, I meant it. Like, literally, I meant it. I know that's a really dark thing to hear, but it's true. And I told her as she was laying there, I was like, if you ever touch me again, that's it. And I'll never talk to you again. I'm done. And Trip, I'll tell you this is what's so wild about this life and this journey. That is singularly the hardest decision I've ever made. Nothing I've ever done has come remotely close to the difficulty of that choice. But without that choice, I would not be here talking to you. We will not have empowered hundreds of thousands of people around the world. None of the things that we are building in Think Unbroken would exist. And I had to make that decision for me. And what most people don't understand is that, like, it's your mom that is in your way right now. And it's, coming to truth is hard. In life, we want to look at, this, circling back to the finger, like, I want to look at this thing and make a story for it and make it make believe and make it make sense, right? But we can't live in worlds that are dismayed by that kind of thought process. Instead, what you have to do is look at the world for what it truly is. And so when I look at this finger, when I look at these experiences, I just remind myself, this actually happened. Don't run from it.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing you talk about too is, you were homeless at 9 years old. How were you around other kids? Were you avoidant? Were you comfortable? Like, how was your demeanor around other children?
Oh, it was psychopathic, dude. I mean, like, because first off, I was the quiet, isolated kid. My stepdad had beaten me into remission in this way where, like, I literally would not talk, right? And if I did, it was crazy shit that I would say, and then I would get in trouble all the time for my mouth. I probably still get in trouble for my mouth, but I'm like, whatever, I don't give a shit. And so, it was between the way that I spoke to other kids, being this kid who was, here's what's interesting, man. That's a fucking awesome question. So when we grow up in a traumatic childhood, right, we have to understand the function of the brain, right? Yeah. Everyone knows at this point, I assume, if you're into personal development in any capacity, you probably have heard the brain is about survival. Great. We all know that. What we don't talk about enough is like the secondary primary function of the brain, which is making meaning, right? And so what happens is, in those circumstances of the experiences that we have in which we are under threat, and really pretty much everything that ever happens to us ever, the brain assesses it and goes, am I safe? Yes or no? And it's like this check system, right? Yep. And then it makes meaning of the experience that happened so that you can then store within yourself the understanding of what you need to do when that situation occurs again, right? Yeah. Again, looping back into safety.
Your neocortex, yeah.
Exactly. So now imagine for a moment that you're in a household where every single time you are you, right? Meaning you are trying to understand who you are as a child by the experimentation that it requires to learn through falling down effectively, right? And what happens is, every time that this happens, the negative reinforcement of beatings, of starvation, of belittlement, of whatever it is, like, comes in and seeps in those experiences. And so the brain goes, wait a second, if I'm me, it's dangerous. So I'm not going to be me anymore. And what happened, Trip, when I was a kid is I became a chameleon, right? You see this all the time in kids who are abused. And I started liking the shit that you liked, and I wore the clothes you wore, and I talked how you talked, and I was into the things you were into, and I had no sense of self in any capacity.
Yeah.
And so on this one hand, I'm this chameleon, and on the other hand, I'm a hyper violent. When I say hyper violent, dude, I mean, I must have been in 500 fights between elementary school and high school. Broken my hands multiple times on people's faces, broken all my fingers in both the hands, stitches on my face, like crazy shit, man.
And that's
crazy.
probably not to even include the battles of family.
Oh my God, dude, my brothers and I went to war in way you can. Dude, I won't even get into it because it's so chaotic. And it took us a long time to come together in brotherhood because we were pitted against each other for love. Oh, you want mom to take you to the dollar movie? Like, okay, let's see who loves each other more. Show me your affection. Right. And so one time, dude, I'll show this one time I took my little brother and I literally held him and slammed him through the drywall of our grandma's house. Right.
Yeah.
That's how crazy it was.
Yeah.
And one of them, we talk about this, so I'll share it. One of them pulled a knife on me. He tried to stab me when we were fucking 13.
Gosh.
Why? Why though, Trip? Why?
Yeah.
That's the question people don't ask. Right. And it's because my stepdad was super violent.
Victim
beat the shit out of us. Beat the shit out of my mom. Always breaking stuff. Massive anger issues. My mom, super violent when she wasn't strung out on fucking Oxycontin and Vicodin, right? You know, Oxycontin, that thing that happened in the late 90s, is the reason my mom is dead today. Died legless in some random space in Indiana that nobody knows because she was addicted to those pills so badly it took everything from her. And so what happens is, as kids, we model everything. My communication was violent. My love language was anger. The way that we interacted with each other was, man, like my brother, there's chipped bone in my right hand to this day because he threw a fucking brick at me when we were playing basketball, right? And that all is because of what we learned in that house. Now, here's where it gets really interesting when you start to understand the dynamics of generational trauma. Go look at their parents.
Oh, yeah.
Go look at their parents. I'll tell you right now, there's things that I witnessed, like between my stepdad's mother's house and my grandmother's house, that you're like, dude, if that stuff happened today, everybody would get locked up.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody. And so, of course, I was this massively angry, violent, non-communicative child who had straight Fs, learning disabilities, and wet the bed because I was in a constant cortisol state. Right. And so the thing that people have to understand is there is causation and correlation to everything that happens, and your behaviors and your dynamics. And it all starts with what is modeled in your house as a child.
Yeah. And I'm sure that identity crisis of sorts didn't stop, because you mentioned you got adopted at 12 by your grandmother. And you mentioned she was, racist from Tennessee. I'm sure that put you through the ringer as well.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I've got like these pictures of me with like, how old are you?
Right now?
Yeah.
Our listeners, I'm 40.
Okay, so we're almost the same age. So you remember chili bowl haircuts that white boys used to have in the 90s?
Oh, I never had one.
Okay, but you know them.
My friends had them, yes.
So my grandmother would give me those kind of haircuts, and I have curly afro hair.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so imagine that, right? And then more so, we had a copy of Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf, in our house. My uncle's a part of the Aryan Brotherhood, still in prison in this life for like crazy shit that he did. And we weren't allowed to have black kids in our house. And I went to a predominantly black high school.
Do you think she took a lot of what she was going through, her prejudice, her what have you, out on you since you were biracial?
I don't think it was an out on me thing. I think that she just grew up in America in the 30s and 40s, bro.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. It's a different time.
Yeah, totally different time. And you got all these racist grandparents that are dying right now, and the world is changing. Look, I'm gonna call it what it is, dude. It's fact. And what's really interesting about it is, like, I think that a lot of what it was that she was just vehemently like racist across the board. right? It wasn't just towards Black people. It was if they were
Anyone who wasn't white.
Hispanic, if they
Yeah.
were Asian. Like, dude, some of the shit she would say about Asian people, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about, lady?
Yeah.
And so, you know, you grow up and you're in that environment, and it was wild, man, because it did rub off on me. And it took me a long time to be like, yo, this is really dark, dude. You
Yeah.
cannot be like this. You cannot talk like this. And you know, it's one of those things. We grew up in a society, we grew up in a country where that has been socially acceptable since the foundation of the landing of the Mayflower.
Mm-hmm.
And so you come across that, you look at that, that's generational trauma as well. That's an impact in the world. That changes the scope of people's belief in themselves, right? You know, and I remember at one point I also had to do the same thing with my grandmother, and I'm like, I'm done with you. I'm out. I'm not, dude. I wish I could tell people how important it is to put yourself first.
Yeah.
Like if I could teach anybody anything, and what I try to really push people in when we're coaching and when they're in programs and they're in conferences and everything, is like yourself, this container of who you are, supersedes everyone else, period.
Yeah.
And I know that's a weird thing to say or hear, because people are always like, well, you're supposed to be of service. You're supposed to put everybody
Got
first.
such a big heart.
Dude, yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's so wrong.
Yeah.
It's so wrong, because how can you serve others if you're not serving yourself?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I discovered in this, and why I made the decisions to remove my mother, remove my grandmother, take my stepfather out of my life, put restraining orders on them, tell them never talk, like the chaos of all that. And then I did the same with friends, with business associates, with anybody who was not on my page.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to do that. And it's not about being crass. It's not about being an asshole. It's not about even trying to make people feel bad about who they are. Right? It's about you saying, this is who I am, and you are interrupting the space in which I get to exist with your ideals, with your actions, and with your words that are not serving me in a way that helps me make my life what I want it to be.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is the older I get, the deeper into this journey I get, the more people I work with. Like, dude, I look at my circle of friends,
mm-hmm.
like literal friends. They're some of the most powerful people in the world. And the people who are not trying to serve and be a part of this and create life and do something beautiful, bro, there's no space in my calendar for you.
Yeah.
I posted this the other day. You need to really take inventory who's sitting at your table.
100%.
Because the difference between success and failure in your life isn't just action and mindset, but it's also like, who's around you? Who's in your ear? Who's sharing? I'll give you a great example, man. So I remember when I was like 12 years old, I was at my grandma's house and I'm sitting on the floor. We had one of those, you remember those big RCA TVs that were gigantic wooden boxes, monstrosities?
They had like the cloth over the speaker
exactly.
piece. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then the actual TV itself was about 10 meters long, 10
static from like 10 feet away.
100%.
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm sitting on the ground. I'm watching Anthony Bourdain's first travel show, Chef's Tour. And I'll never forget this till the day I die. My grandmother is in the rocking chair behind me, chain smoking Misty Slim 100s, drinking a Pabst Blue Ribbon, rocking in this chair, watching this show, playing a video poker game, like on those little old digital video games.
Yep.
And I'm so enamored by, like, he's in like Vietnam or Spain or wherever and I'm like, oh my God, this looks, I want to go. Yeah. And I turned around to my grandma and I go, I'm going to go travel the world one day. Trip, you know what she says to me, man? She goes, I don't know about that. I don't know. The world's dangerous out there. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Do not take advice from people who have not done the thing you are trying to do.
100%.
To this day, I carry a picture of my grandmother in my passport. I've lived in 12 countries. I've visited more than I can count. I wrote my first book on the islands and beaches of Thailand, bro.
Wow.
My grandma ain't never been on a fucking plane one time.
Yeah.
You have to mind your circle and ask yourself who's sitting at my table.
But I got a question about the table part. But first, how does that feel knowing, like, hindsight, looking back at that moment, sitting in front of that TV and now being able to say, like, I've done all that?
It's, dude, I'm stubborn, man. Like, honestly, Trip, when it comes down to it, you can ask anyone who knows me. The number one thing that I know to be true about myself, if I say something, it's done.
Yeah.
The only difference is time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that stops me from doing what I want to
Yeah,
do.
it's
It's
got to
just
have
time.
time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not time as an excuse. That's in time as in I'm not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, I look at everything I'm done and I'm super proud of myself, man. It takes massive effort to live this
Oh,
life.
your whole story in general, I mean, to me, is just super fascinating. And one thing I do have a question about, with no secure attachments with people early in your childhood that really provided you any safety, how did that impact relationships moving forward? And then I assume you pretty much tackled that beast at some point. And if so, how'd you do it?
Dude, you really asked the best question. I've been a guest on podcasts like fucking 500 times. You asked the best questions, man.
Say that.
So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
Look, here's the reality. You're spot on. And go look at resiliency research for children in trauma. If you have just one person, the difference between success and failure in your life drastically increases. If you just have one person who rears you into the world. And here's the weird juxtaposition of everything I just said for the last 12 minutes. My grandmother, in some sense, was that person, because I had safety of a place to live.
Yeah.
I had food every day when I lived with her. Right. Now, when I was with my mother, I didn't. Right. Our electricity getting turned off, our water turned off, getting evicted. I was stealing food to survive. Sometimes it would be food from the church. It would be clothes from the church, pantry stuff, no security. I remember one time I rolled off the bunk bed, slammed my neck onto the bottom rung. To this day, I still have a neck issue. Went to the doctor on Monday for it. My mother did not take me to the hospital. My neck was probably fractured.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you don't have that security, what do you think happens? You learn to become hyper independent.
Yep.
This is a thing that people do not talk about enough in this space. And being hyper independent is that space where you're like, I have to do everything on my own all the time because I do not trust anyone.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how that did not make my life better. I can't even list the ways, because it's so crazy how that ideal of I must do everything on my own made my life terrible. And when I started asking for help, everything got better. The coin flip is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so my relationships were always like, it's got to be on my terms. It's got to be my way. If you don't like it, fuck you. That's your problem. One of the most dangerous sentences any human being can ever utter is, that's just how I am.
Oh yeah. You gotta understand me. That's just how I am.
Talk about the ultimate fixed mindset, dude. And that's what I would always tell people. That's just who I cheat on my girlfriend. That's just who I am. 50 grand in debt. That's how I am. Smoke 2 packs a day. That's how I am. Drink myself to sleep.
True.
That's how I am. Go and party with my friends till 4 a.m. and then go to work at 7. That's just who I am.
If you don't like how that is,
you don't like it, go fuck yourself. Yeah. You don't like it?
Yeah.
Fuck you. That's your problem, not mine.
Yep.
And that is so, so, so dangerous.
Yep.
And today I look at, like, one of the best things in my life is that I get to get coached by, again, arguably some of the greatest minds in the universe. And when they just put something in my face, I'm like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing me what I'm missing, not in this sense of belittlement or hurt or trying to like disband who I am, but saying, are you really paying attention? Are you really paying attention? Are you seeing why you're behaving like this? And the thing that's so powerful and beautiful about that is that's helped me build and create my circle of influence in a way that I can't even explain the impact that it's had on my life. Yeah. Speaking on the biggest stages in the world, having one of the biggest podcasts in the world. I mean, like, Oprah's coach Tim Story has mentored me. You know what I mean? Like, do you know how crazy that is?
That is.
And that's because I stopped saying this is who I am, and I'm started saying, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
I need guidance. And in that, and look, the rebuild process, even to this day, is something I'm still working on, right? Instead of when someone hurts my feelings, kicking them out of my life forever, right? Hyper independence. I go, what is this really about? And then I learned and I understood something really powerful about boundaries. Like, they're not for you, Trip, they're for me.
Mm-hmm.
My boundaries are for me. I learned how to create value, wants, needs, interests. I learned how to get really, really massively clear about who I am. And that only came from my willingness to shed the old identity that I had of not enoughness, of not being lovable, of people don't like me, of being a chameleon. You don't like me, Trip? I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like the clothes I wear? Not my problem. You think I curse too much? Great. What does that have to do with me? And that's the thing that happened when I started changing that narrative, is I realized it's okay to be me.
Yeah.
And that's the thing people have to understand. I'll never forget this, man. I was having a conversation with someone on an airplane, and I have this tattoo of this Day of the Dead girl on my right calf. It's like gigantic because my leg is huge. And she goes, this is the weirdest conversation I've ever had. We're on the plane. We've said nothing to each other the whole time. You know, one of those, because it's a freaking airplane. We're all doing our own thing.
Do I touch elbows with them? Do I not?
Yeah. Like, you know what? You get a little extra elbow, you get a little extra leg. Like, let's figure this out. And we stop, we get ready to get off the plane. And she goes, hey, can I ask you a question? And I go, yeah, sure, whatever. And she goes, do you believe in the devil? And I was like, what? She goes, I see you have that tattoo on your leg. And I look at her and Trip, I swear to you, dude, I just go, that is none of your business. People will always look for a reason to justify who they are to other people because they're afraid that they're going to make people feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I do not care what you think about me. And that is such a powerful healing tool for people. All the time, Trip, people ask me, they go, what does it mean to heal? And it's being able to stand in your truth without justification. That is the ultimate, because that means you have crossed all the bridges of the chaos. And when you do that, I know this is a very long answer to your question. When you do that, what happens is that your relationships change, your friendships change, your dynamics change. And that's what you want. Jay-Z said, people around you saying that you changed. Well, I didn't do all this work to stay the same.
Yeah.
And I think about that every single day. My relationships are better. My friendships are better. My businesses are better. Everything is so much different than it used to be. And are there people that cannot stand me? Bro, you should see the DMs I get. Don't care.
Yeah.
Because for every one of those, there's 10 people whose lives are changing every day through Think Unbroken.
Yeah. Well, that's when you really start living life, is when you're not, as you mentioned earlier, trying to be that chameleon for everybody else. You're really not living your life. You're living it to appease others. But when you start to be your authentic you, that's when you really start to succeed. And you had, that moment, you mentioned it, just a Saturday morning, 11 o'clock, eating some chocolate cake. What was different about that morning as opposed to every other day you looked in the mirror that helped you discover resilience?
No idea. I don't know, man. The 1,000th failure, the straw that broke the camel's back, that concept, that idea that, man, here I am. It was this interesting reflection. It was two things. Man, you ask great questions. Fuck. There's two things. One, I remember distinctly sitting there, and it is the fittest people in the world doing the thing that they're amazing at.
That's what I was going to ask, the CrossFit Games.
Yeah, chasing this dream, chasing this idea of the ability to be who it is that they want to be. And here I am, former athlete, won city tournaments in wrestling, state qualifier, blah, 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 blah. And being like, you're terrified to be great. You're terrified that it's okay to be more than you are today. You're terrified of the truth. And I get emotional even thinking about it, because it was like 26 years of my life. Only thing I'd ever done was what everyone else said I was going to be. I had no identity. I'd never been honest with myself or anyone else for that fucking matter. I had no idea how to show up for myself. I was good at making money, but I didn't have clarity about anything else.
Yeah.
And I was just so tired of yet again another failed relationship, another call from the bill collector, another conversation with one of my brothers who was like, go fuck yourself. I was just tired of straight up, dude. What it really comes down to, if I narrowed it down to like a sentence, I was just tired of my own bullshit.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to get to that place. You have to get to that place. And so it was this parlay of watching these people where it's like, man, they probably have stuff too, but at least they're trying.
Yeah.
And me being like, keep destroying your life, loser. And look, that's a hard reality to come to. I have no shame or guilt in being like, I was a loser. Call it what it is. Call a spade. Look at it right there, face value. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
Stop hiding from the truth. Stop hiding the fact that you're this way mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, sexually, financially. Stop hiding. Be who you are and face the consequences of your decisions. The problem is that most people aren't willing to pay the taxes.
Yeah. Yep.
Look, they're coming one way or another. And what I realized, Trip, not in that moment, but in the years, here's the thing, 26 to 30 were the hardest 4 years of my life. Dude, it was one step forward, a million steps backwards. It was a consummate battle of self, of changing the identity, of stripping the old narratives and beliefs. And in that window, one of the things happened that was really beautiful is I realized one of the most inherent truths of life. If you do not live on your terms, you will die with regret.
Mm-hmm.
And regret is my biggest fear.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said too about the 26 to 30, because we were talking about the brain science earlier, and studies have shown like the male brain stops maturing around 26, where for females it's more like 19 or 20. So it's interesting. That was kind of like a turning point in your life, was that 26 to 30-year-old range there. But looking back, before we get into all this incredible stuff you're doing now with the podcast, the book, everything that you just unpacked and talked about, what advice would you go back and give to a 10-year-old version of yourself?
So I'll give you two answers because people ask me that question a lot. One, nothing.
Just let it play out.
I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
This is timeline, right? You go back, this is some Back to the Future shit. You change one thing, you step on one bug, everything's different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Now, in a practicality sense, saying that, let's take that out of the equation.
Yeah.
I would just say, keep going, man.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you're in front of, keep going. And remind myself, the hardest thing, the worst thing that is ever going to happen to you has already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Stop catastrophizing. Stop foreshadowing the inevitability of death, demise, pain. That may not be true. You don't know. But the only way you're going to find out is you have to try. And so keep going. Face what's in front of you. Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Does it suck? Yep. Is it going to be painful? Yep. Are you going to be like, man, I wish I would just crawl up in bed, grab that bottle, eat some gummy bears, and play video games all day? Yep. Make a decision, man. What do you want? And
now let's talk about, incredible stuff you're doing. An author, podcast host. You're helping adult survivors of child abuse through, helping those trauma survivors. Talk to us about everything that you're doing, and where can they find the book, the podcast, and all the incredible work you got out there?
Yeah. Everything. I'm on social everywhere at Michael Unbroken.
Mm-hmm.
But we put everything in our community for free. If you go to thinkunbrokenacademy.com. And of course you can listen to just the Think Unbroken podcast. It's everywhere. And man, look, here's the thing. This wasn't my plan. You go look at my life. Like, I did not sign up for this job. You know what I'm saying? Like 7-8 years ago, I was just trying to take care of me. 10 years ago, I was just trying to figure out my shit. I was not trying to do this. It was never my intention. It was never in my cards. It was never something that I had put mental energy into. It just happened. And it just happened to be that I started doing this before it became something that is, I hate to say popular on social, but it is, it just is. And so 6 years ago, almost 7 now, when I started putting out stuff about this, it was under a whole different company, whole different brand. It was just me blogging anonymously. I was just sharing what I was learning because I was like putting myself in this position where I'm going into these educational courses with people who had like doctorates and PhDs getting continuing education. I'm just sitting there as a civilian, just learning. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to share this. And it was me going to name a modality of therapy. I've done it. Literally, I've done them all. And so I'm sitting here going to therapy 3 times a week. I'm going into groups. I'm going into support groups. I'm doing men's groups. I'm doing everything, just trying to heal. And I was just sharing it, just putting it out there. And people just started asking me to help them. And I said, no, I'm good. Because I was trying to help me. Right. And then I figured out something really interesting. I was like, you can better serve people if you're helping them while you're helping you. Right. It's this daisy chain.
Yeah.
And so what happened is I'm coaching people. I'm writing this blog. I sat down. I said, I'm going to write a book. Dude, again, going back to like what I told you about that job with that Fortune 10.
Yep.
Hundreds of people told me no. Then I figured it out. When I started writing this book, every publisher and agent I reached out to told me no. Every single one of them. Nope. People aren't going to want to read that. Well, I pushed it to number 1 in a couple of different Amazon categories. That ain't rocket science, but I did it. And then I've sold over 10,000 copies of that book on my own, through my own website.
Wow. Congrats.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because I don't care what anyone ever tells me. You cannot stop me from chasing my dream.
Yeah.
And so when I started doing that, sharing that, and then the podcast had come out, I recorded the first episode of the podcast over 4 years ago underneath a blanket in like, I was somewhere in Asia. I want to say I was in Bali, but I don't remember. It might've been Vietnam. Either way, I remember I was under a desk with a blanket. At the beginning, nobody listened. I actually just shared this on my social the other day. Month 1 of my podcast, we did 19 downloads. 12 of them were me. Guaranteed.
You were running those numbers up.
Because I was trying to figure it out. I was like,
Yeah.
Does that sound good? Is that where you do that? Blah, blah.
It's hard.
Last month, we did over 80,000 downloads. We'll do 1 million this year. And combined with all the social media impressions, we'll probably do 5 million impressions this year.
Wow.
Right? So all of that stuff is to say this. It all serves one function, one purpose: to end generational trauma in my lifetime through education and information. That's it. That's the goal. That's the mission. That's the game. That's why I spend fucking 100 hours a week working on this, because I want to create and show people possibility. It'd be hard. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody who had a crazier childhood than me.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
You're gonna be hard pressed. And it's not a competition. So let's be very clear. It's just to say that if I can do it, you can too. And you hear that all the time. I was set up for failures in ways that people cannot comprehend. I should not be here. My 3 childhood best friends have been murdered. My mom's gone because she was a drug addict. My family is dismantled and in dismay. And yet here I am. I made decisions. I made choices. I had the willingness to face my fucking demons, man. I made massive mistakes in my life. I've done stuff that I probably can't even talk about because I go to prison for it. Right? Let's not get it twisted. This isn't sunshine and rainbows. Kobe Bryant has this fucking amazing quote. It may not be his, but he's the person I remember always saying that. He says, if you see me fighting a bear, be worried about the bear. And that's how I feel about this. All of it.
Yeah.
All of it.
And you said thinkunbrokenacademy.com.
Yep.
Head over there. And also, one thing that really stood out to me, I was going through doing my research here before we get started with thinkunbroken.com. And something that really popped out was an estimated 70% of adults in the world have experienced at least one traumatic event in their life that's forever impacted them. Some of these events are child abuse, domestic abuse, deaths, accidents, mental, emotional, unwanted touch, physical traumas. And then these stats, 30% of adults report being physically abused as a child, 21% of adults report being sexually abused as a child, and 11% of adults report being emotionally abused as a child. And key word there, report. So those numbers are probably actually a lot higher in terms of people not reporting it.
Totally. Those not, I don't even, I use those stats in a lot of places because I think that they make an impact, right? They stopped you. They're inaccurate, period.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
you grew up in a
yeah.
house like mine, man, you can't talk about this. You're gonna get your head slammed through a wall. Trust
Oh,
me,
yeah.
I found that out. Right. You live in a society, especially growing up. We're both almost the same age. We live in a don't ask, don't tell society. Non-reports at school, non-reports from churches, non-reports from your neighbor. I mean, dude, it's got to be 95% of
You were
people.
uneducated on a lot
Truthfully.
of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%, man.
Yeah. So no, I think you're doing amazing work. I think it's incredible what you're doing. I mean, when I saw you and everything that you have out there, I was like, if there is ever a guest for embracing their shadows and making a part of who they are, you were definitely the person that comes to mind. So I'm encouraging every single one of our listeners out there to go support you, give you some love, check out all the amazing things you're doing with the podcast, the books, everything. Last question for you. When your name is mentioned 50 years from now, what do you want people to say about you?
That he lived life on his terms.
Yeah. I think you're the ultimate example of perseverance and resilience. So I can't thank you enough. Final comments for our listeners.
Yeah, man. Look, at the end of the day, and look, I realize I'm not for everybody, and I carry a level of intensity most people don't get or tap into. But find the person for you. Find whoever that is that you need to raise your hand and ask for help from. Somebody that is going to impact and change you, and invest in yourself, man. I'm telling you right now, those who pay attention, period. Think about all the free shit you've ever gotten that you've done nothing with. And then think about what you've done with the money that you've spent. You have to have skin in the game. People reach out to me all the time. They're like, man, I'm suffering. I'm hurt. I'm lost. I don't have any money. And I'm like, good. Now is the perfect time to invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Because the first, I'll tell you a very, very quick story. So I'm 26 heading into 27. I've been kind of like stepping into this healing journey, and I'm 50 grand in debt. And I see this ad on social for a Brendan Burchard course. Now, Brendan is arguably one of the most well-known coaches in the world. He's worked with everybody, blah, 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 blah. And this course was $50. And Trip, I was $50,000 in debt at that time. Borrowing money from my girlfriend who lived with me to pay our rent. Broke. And I looked down at my shoes, and there were a pair of Jordan 12s that were about $300. And it hit me. Oh, you love your shoes more than you love yourself. And I made a decision in that moment. I was like, fuck it, $50 more, let's go. That is one of the singular pivotal changes in my life. And now, as of today, I've invested almost $300,000 and almost 11,000 hours into this journey.
Nice.
But start where you are.
Yeah.
For some people, it's the library. That's where I started. For some people, it's that $50 course. For some people, it's something else. You've got to have skin in the game, man. Because if you're just expecting somebody to knock on your door and come and save your ass, they ain't coming.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap this episode up. This is episode 101, folks. So we just passed that 100 mark. Excited for what's coming our way. Next week, we're going to have the CEO of Giant Worldwide, Jeremy Kubicek. He's on here, and he's going to be talking about the Peace Index, his new book. So definitely want to check that episode out. It's an amazing episode. But for this week, that's going to conclude this episode of the Shadows Podcast.